Don't listen to her. She's always been a fraud. My father's words cut through the restaurant right in front of 30 relatives. My mother agreed with a single nod as if I was nothing but a liar at their celebration. I didn't fight back. I smiled, poured another glass of wine, and let them keep eating, never suspecting the truth. Because every chair, every plate, every toast that night belonged to me. 1 month later, when they walked into a dinner, I arranged their perfect story collapsed. Before I tell you how hit like and comment where you're watching from, have you ever been erased by your own family? My name is Aria Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and if you only knew me through my parents' words, you'd think I was some kind of cautionary tale. A woman who never quite measured up, who spent her life inventing stories to feel important. That's the narrative they've been repeating since I was a kid, and for a long time, I let them write it. On the surface, the Bennetts were the kind of family people envied. My dad, Robert, carried himself like the king of a suburban castle. My mom, Linda, played the part of the gracious hostess. My sister, Natalie, 4 years younger, was the shining centerpiece. And me, I was the other one. The one people forgot to mention in introductions, the one who smiled tightly in family photos while the spotlight was fixed somewhere else. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was baked into everything. Christmas morning, 1999, I was 7 years old. Natalie ripped into wrapping paper and uncovered a brand new pink bicycle with streamers on the handlebars and a silver bell. I unwrapped a backpack for school and a box of pencils. Mom leaned down and whispered, "Santa knows Natalie's been extra good this year." Even at 7, I understood. Natalie was special. I was practical. Years later, when I brought home a report card with straight A's, my parents tacked it to the fridge without comment. 2 weeks later, Natalie managed to drag her math grade from a D to a C+. Dad beamed like she'd won an Olympic medal. "This shows real improvement, sweetheart," he said, sweeping her off for ice cream. I asked if I could come too. He didn't even look at me when he answered. "You didn't improve anything, Aria. Your grades are always good." That was the moment I learned that consistency meant invisibility. High school should have been my time. Junior year. I won the state academic decathlon first in our family to ever achieve something like that. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon, but that same morning, Dad dropped his fork over breakfast and announced, "We need to get to Natalie's tennis match." I tried to remind them about my award. "Don't be selfish," Mom snapped. "Your sister needs our support." I stood on that stage alone, clapping for myself, while my family sat 30 yards away, watching Natalie lose in straight sets. When I brought the trophy home, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's nice, sweetie. Can you start dinner? Your mom's tired from the match." By college, I knew better than to expect anything. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school, graduated summa cum laude, the first Bennett to ever walk across that stage. They didn't come. Natalie was throwing a housewarming party the same weekend, and apparently that was more important. I walked alone, gripping the diploma in my hand, while my parents toasted her new apartment. That was my family. Their love was loud for Natalie, and their silence was deafening for me. You'd think after college I would have stopped hoping, but old habits die hard. Every time something good happened in my life, some small part of me wanted to pick up the phone and hear my parents say, "We're proud of you." But the pattern never broke, it just sharpened with age. When I bought my first car, I pulled into their driveway, eager for once to show them something tangible. Mom barely glanced at it before turning the conversation toward Natalie's new haircut. When I got my second promotion, I called to share the news. Dad cut me off midway. "That's great, Aria. Did you hear Natalie's dating a guy from her office?" Real catch. My achievements were background noise to whatever Natalie happened to be doing that week. Whenever I tried to push back to tell them how invisible they made me feel, I got the same script. "Stop being so sensitive. You're too old to need this much attention. Why can't you just be happy for your sister?" They turned my hurt into evidence that I was dramatic needy, the exact caricature they painted for the family. And the more they said it, the quieter I became. So I stopped sharing. When I signed the lease on my first studio apartment, I didn't mention how I was juggling 3 jobs to afford it. When I started studying real estate and business management late at night, I didn't tell them. When I scraped together every tip, every birthday check, every spare dollar to save for a down payment, they had no idea. My life became a closed book because the people who should have cared most never wanted to read it anyway. Meanwhile, Natalie's every milestone turned into a family-wide celebration. A new job, a vacation, even Employee of the Month at her entry-level office gig, those were champagne-worthy. Meanwhile, I was bartending until 2 a.m., building spreadsheets in the morning and learning to patch drywall on the weekends. The irony was brutal. While they called me dramatic, I was quietly building the foundation of something they couldn't even imagine. The breaking point came last year when Natalie got engaged. The engagement party was treated like a royal coronation. I watched them beam at her fiancé like he'd delivered the second coming, while I stood in the corner with a polite smile plastered on my face. A month later, they booked the biggest dinner, yet a celebration of Natalie's engagement with 30 relatives invited, and they chose my restaurant. That night, as I watched them laugh and toast, oblivious to the fact that the venue belonged to me, I realized how deeply the narrative had sunk in. They weren't just dismissing me, they were rewriting me as a fraud in front of everyone. My father's voice calling me a liar, my mother's nod, sealing the judgment. It was a public execution of whatever little dignity I still had with them. And yet, as the humiliation burned through me, something unexpected stirred. Not just anger, not just hurt, a resolve. If they wanted a show, I was going to give them one. After that night, I went home and sat in the dark, still in the same dress I'd worn to their celebration. The smell of wine clung to my hair. My hands shook from holding back tears in public. For years, I'd let them call me dramatic, too sensitive, a liar. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth. I picked up my phone and called the one person in my family who never joined the chorus against me. "Emma," I whispered when she answered. Her voice snapped like fire through the receiver. I saw what they did. It was disgusting. "It wasn't anything new," I said, trying to sound steady. "That's the problem. They've been doing this your whole life, and tonight everyone saw it." There was silence between us, heavy but different, like an understanding had finally crystallized. I didn't have to explain the years of favoritism. Emma had witnessed it. She'd seen every Christmas, every report card, every time I got brushed aside. For once, someone else was angry on my behalf. I took a breath. "Emma, I need to tell you something. Something they don't know. What is it? I own that restaurant, the whole building, everything they were celebrating in tonight, it's mine." The line went quiet. Then came her laugh, not cruel, but sharp with satisfaction. "You're serious? 3 years now," I said. "They've been eating at my tables, drinking my wine, humiliating me in my own house." Emma's tone shifted to steel. "So, what's the plan?" I looked around my apartment. Bare walls still hung with cheap frames, the space where I'd eaten countless peanut butter sandwiches just to save money. The plan had already begun forming in my head during dessert at the party. "I'm going to show them," I said. Not by screaming, not by fighting, by making them sit down and face the truth they've been denying. Emma didn't hesitate. "Then I'll be there. I won't let them twist it around on you." The next morning, I walked into my restaurant, not as an owner hidden behind the curtain, but as a woman plotting her reveal. I asked James, my manager, to prepare documents, deeds, licenses, proof. He didn't even blink. His loyalty was steady, almost protective. Over the next 3 weeks, I arranged the dinner. Fresh flowers, candles, personalized menus embossed in gold. I wanted no room for doubt, no corner for them to claim it was just another illusion of mine. When the night came, they would sit in my house again. But this time, I wouldn't be invisible. This time, their story would collapse, and mine would rise. The night of the dinner arrived with the kind of crisp chill that carries whispers of winter. My restaurant glowed like a beacon on the corner, gold light spilling through the tall glass windows, the hum of jazz floating just beneath the sound of the city. I stood by the entrance, steadying my breath as one car after another pulled up. Natalie was the first to walk in her diamond ring, catching the light like she wanted everyone to notice. My parents followed close behind Robert with his stiff shoulders, Linda with her rehearsed smile. The rest of the family filed in uncles, aunts, cousins, all marveling at the flowers on each table, the soft flicker of candles, the embossed menus with their names written in gold. Wow, Aria. Aunt Carol said, her eyes darting around. How on earth did you manage this? I smiled. I have my ways. The truth was written all over the room. My staff moved with precision, attentive to every detail. James checked in with me quietly, his hand resting on the leather folder tucked under his arm. I nodded. We were ready. Dinner began with small talk, the scrape of silverware, the clink of glasses. Natalie soaked up the attention, retelling the story of her proposal like it was a fairy tale no one had heard before. My parents chimed in with adoring laughs, filling every silence with more praise for their golden child. I sat at the other end of the table, calm, silent, waiting. Halfway through the main course, Grandma Rose leaned toward me. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her weathered hand brushing mine. "This feels like the family dinners we used to have. Before everything." Her eyes searched mine with a kind of pride I hadn't seen since childhood. "You've done something beautiful." That single sentence grounded me. It reminded me why I was here, not for revenge alone, but for recognition that I wasn't invisible. Then it happened. My father stood wineglass, raised his voice, cutting across the room just as it had weeks before. "I think we should all acknowledge Aria's effort tonight." He glanced at me with a smirk. "She's always had a flair for appearances, hasn't she?" Laughter rippled uneasily. My mother followed, nodding. "Yes, she's always been imaginative. You know, she's been telling people she runs businesses, owns property. We all know she tends to exaggerate." I felt the familiar sting, but this time it didn't pierce me. This time I was ready. I rose slowly, the room falling quiet. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I crossed to the service station. James met me halfway, the leather folder in his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," James said, his voice professional and clear, "it's my honor to introduce you to the owner of this establishment, the woman who built it from the ground up, Miss Aria Bennett." The room froze. Forks hung mid-air. My father's glass stopped halfway to his lips. My mother's face drained of color. James laid the documents on the table, property, deeds, business licenses, tax forms, all bearing my name. For 3 years, she has run this restaurant, expanded it, and turned it into one of the most sought-after venues in the city. Whispers rose around the table. Uncle Mike leaned forward. "This is real, it's real," I said softly, my voice carrying more weight than if I'd shouted. "Every plate you've eaten, from every glass you've raised in celebration was mine to give." My father shook his head, muttering, "Impossible." "Actually, it isn't," Emma spoke up. Her eyes locked on him. "You've been tearing her down while she's been building this. The only fraud here is the way you've treated her." The air crackled. Aunt Carol gasped. "Aria, you own all this." "Yes," I answered. "And I've stayed quiet year after year while you called me dramatic, attention-seeking, worthless. I smiled when you dismissed me. I kept building while you were too busy to notice." My mother opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "You told me to stop being sensitive, to stop needing attention. But this isn't about attention. It's about truth. And tonight, the truth sits in front of you." The silence was heavy, broken only by Grandma Rose's slow clap. "Well done, sweetheart, well done." One by one, other voices joined in. Cousin Sarah. "This explains so much, Uncle Mike." I always thought the favoritism was wrong. Even the younger cousins spoke shy but firm, admitting they'd noticed how I was treated. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. My father tried to recover his tone, desperate. "Aria, we didn't mean to hurt you." "Yes, you did," I replied, calm as stone. "Every time you dismissed my success, every time you told me I was lying, every time you told the family I was nothing, you meant it. Don't pretend otherwise now." Linda reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "We're sorry if we seemed unsupportive." "You weren't unsupportive," I said, pulling back. "You were cruel. There's a difference." The table erupted in murmurs. My parents sat stunned, their kingdom of denial crumbling. And I sat taller than I ever had, not because I'd humiliated them, but because I'd finally refused to let them rewrite me. The dinner carried on, but everything had changed. Relatives approached me one by one with apologies, admiration, regret. Emma squeezed my shoulder, a silent vow that she'd always stand with me. Grandma Rose leaned close and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Aria, not just for this, but for the grace you showed. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was the woman who built her own table and made the family sit at it." By the time dessert arrived, the balance in the room had shifted completely. No one was hanging on Natalie's every word anymore. They were watching me, listening to me, asking questions about how I built the place from nothing. For years, I'd been treated like a ghost at family gatherings, but that night, I was flesh and bone, undeniable. My grandmother insisted on sitting beside me, her frail hand wrapped around mine, as if anchoring me in this new reality. "You don't need their approval, Aria," she whispered. "You never did." My parents stayed mostly silent. Their earlier smugness dissolved into an awkward stiffness. They tried to offer one last apology as people were leaving, but it came out thin, rehearsed, like they were more concerned about how they looked than about what they'd done. I didn't argue. I didn't forgive. I just let their words hang in the air, meaningless now that the truth was out. Later, when the room emptied and candles burned low, I walked slowly through the space I had created. My space. For the first time, I felt free of the invisible leash they'd tied around me my whole life. The revenge hadn't been loud or messy. It had been simple, undeniable, final. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting. It's succeeding without their permission. I didn't build this restaurant to prove anything to Robert or Linda Bennett. I built it because I believed in myself when no one else would. That night, the family saw me for who I really am, not the forgotten daughter, not the liar they painted me to be, but the woman who built her own empire. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have supported you, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.